Hello and welcome to my video lecture on embedded dynamic SQL. So up until now, in the past couple of videos, we've been talking about procedures and triggers and syntax. And now what we're going to talk about is the difference between what's known as embedded SQL. So this still is routines and triggers. It's just that how do we get the SQL, or how does the SQL behave inside a routine or a trigger? So you can embed the SQL. When you embed SQL, you hard code the SQL statements, just like you're writing any other program. So it's not a dynamic SQL statement, it's hard coded. A dynamic SQL statement can generate the SQL on the fly as the application is running. So you actually build an SQL statement. Why would you do that? Why would you embed SQL into a third generation language? It can create a much more flexible, accessible interface for the user. It makes the programming a lot easier. There is certainly the possibility to improve performance, and the database security is improved because now instead of granting access to individual users, you can grant access to the application, and you can grant the application rights and privileges in the database. So let's take a quick look at SQL in routines and triggers in, say, Microsoft Access. So this is what I did. I made a copy of the customer table, which is fairly easy to do. Basically, go over to the customer table, right-click, copy, and then you can right-click and paste, and then just give it a name. In my case, I called it customer copy, and I had the checkbox or the option for structure and data. So poof, now I've got my customer copy table. The reason I did that is because I'm going to manipulate some data, and I don't want to destroy this database in any way, shape, or form. Then what I did is under the Create tab, I clicked on Module to create a new module, which opens up Visual Basic for Applications. So here I am in my Module 2. The Module 1 is a bunch of code associated with the application, the big PBFC application, which again, if you feel like it, you can scroll through this and check out some of the code and see what the author is doing there. But much more simply, in Module 2, I just set up 3 different routines. So in this case, I've got a subroutine, which is also a procedure. I'm not passing in any parameters, and you notice I'm not returning any values. So what this is doing is this is dimensioning, this is declaring, this is the declare section in Visual Basic. So this is my variable str_sql, and it's a string, so that's the data type of it. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to pass this hard-coded SQL into that variable, and then I'm going to run it. This is the embedded SQL. Okay, so when I run this, I simply call it, right? I call procedures. So I'm going to call update state. And what that's going to do is that's going to run that SQL statement, which is going to change anybody who lives in New York to New Jersey. We get a warning message, just like we would with any other update statement. We can actually go through this and see that we have home furnishings, we have got Duncan Furniture, we've got A Carpet, and we've got ABC Furniture. So we're expecting all of those to change to New Jersey. So if I click yes, it ends, it brings us back. That would be a transaction. That's called an implicit transaction. I didn't actually use the transaction, the begin and end transaction, but that transaction has ended. So when I go back and I look at that table, I see that all of these states have been changed. All the New York states have been changed to New Jersey. So far, so good. Okay, so that's a procedure with embedded SQL. This is a subroutine that's going to take in parameters. So I have a parameter PSTR because it's a parameter. Again, it's a naming convention. You know, it's the way I've always learned. So PSTR from state is a string, and PSTR to state is also a string. So this is going to take in 2 parameters. So basically what this is going to do is this is going to use Dynamic SQL. So this isn't hard-coded. When this runs, it's going to take whatever values I pass in as parameters, and it's going to complete this SQL statement for me, which will then run. So for instance, if I want to run update state param, I'm going to pass in NJ, right? So now anybody from New Jersey is going to be changed to New York. See how that works? So these are strings, so I have to send them in using double quotes. I need to send in both because neither of these parameters are optional. And when I run that, simply by hitting the enter key, I update 0 rows. Oh, and that's because we have nobody from New York. I get an error message, which again, if I was doing error catching, I would have caught that. So now what I want to do is I want to change people to New York where they live in New Jersey. So the nice part about this is that instead of me hard coding it in, where I can't change it, now I just change the parameters and the SQL rewrites itself. So I run that, and now I'm going to update the 5 rows because I had one person from New Jersey prior to this. So now I've got 5 rows associated that have NJ as the customer state. I click yes. I go back again, an implicit transaction. And then I can see that all of my New Jerseys are now New York. So far, so good. Okay. I hope so. I'm gonna hope you just said, yep, everything's good. So then the last one is a function. And in this case, I'm writing a function that's called test param. So I'm going to pass in a parameter value, and then I'm going to return. This is how I tell it what kind of data type is going to be returned. So in this case, it's Boolean, which is a true, false, yes, no, on, off kind of variable. So when I run test param, it's going to return Boolean. In this case, I'm going to test that the word that I pass in is test. Right? So now I'm going to call test param, and I'm going to pass into that the word test. And then I'm going to put the question mark in front of that because I want it to print out the value that gets returned. And that's how you do that when you're testing in Visual Basic for applications. So when I run that, I don't have to do the call. Silly me. And it comes back true. If I change that to anything else, I put a 1 in there and I run that, it comes back false. Okay, so you've got your routines, you've got your functions, you've got parameters, you've got embedded SQL, you've got dynamic SQL, all in one nice little package right here. And that ends my video lecture on embedded SQL and the example of routines and functions.